Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We are coming to you virtually from Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and today we are north of the border again, all the way up in Regina, Saskatchewan. More about that soon. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here, this is the podcast of choice. This is the podcast for you. We say this is where street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello, I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today, well north of the border, is Phil Simchich. We'll be talking with Phil in just a second. Our guest is the former co-host of the show, Brad Berger. We're going to catch up with Brad. Brad is also the CEO of a comprehensive financial planning company and Ideal Life 360. Welcome, Brad. As you know, we'll be with you right in a moment. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That's iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube. We are all over the place. We are ubiquitous. We also come to you from about a dozen cities, including Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton, Charleston, soon in Columbus and Knoxville. We've got about a dozen cities. Now listen, before we bring on Brad to learn more about having a healthy wallet and a healthy body and lifestyle. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome. You know, we can cross the border now early this way. We still have to show some other materials here in the near future, but glad to be on board with you today. Hey, did you happen to see what our resident billionaire did the other day?
Saw some exciting highlights. It's always interesting what Amazon's doing to expand to market share, market geography.
Well, Jeff Bezos expanded into space. He beat whatever, I forget, it's somewhere about the 62-mile and Blue Origin. He went up into space, and it was about a 10 or 11 minute launch. I watched the entire thing, and I was thinking, Phil, weird things pop into my head. What if you and I had been invited by Jeff Bezos himself, because we are the Shrimp Tank podcast, and he said, Phil and Dan, you're coming with me. First of all, I'm assuming that you would strap in, right?
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Yeah. So I started thinking, I like to have a takeoff song, not like Doug and Bob McKenzie, take off hosers. I know that's a Canadian thing, but if we had some sort of a takeoff song, and I want to know from you, Phil, if Jeff said, hey, Phil, what's our takeoff song going to be? What are we going to pipe into the cabin as we blast off? What would it be?
I'd have to crank up AC/DC Highway to Hell to drown out those rockets.
That's a great intro, isn't it? It's one of the best. So you'd go AC/DC, the band from down, the Thunder from Down Under, Highway to Hell. You know what I would take? It's another hard rock band, and it's Metallica. I would do Enter Sandman, which is one of my. I cook to that. I get really fired up when I listen to Metallica and Enter Sandman. But I want to bring Brad in on this because Brad, I know you watched this, and one of the cool things that happened was Wally Funk. Wally Funk, age 82, became the oldest astronaut to go into space. And the cool thing about Wally Funk is she should have gone back in the 60s, almost 60 years ago, when she was more than qualified, engineering degree and all of the training, but she was a woman, and they wouldn't let women go into space. They chose people like Alan Shepard and John Glenn, which they were all great, but she should have gone. And Bezos gave Wally the chance, and she looked great coming out of the cockpit, or the not the cockpit, whatever they call that top piece that came fun. We talked a lot. People know about Ideal Life 360 and your whole theory on living to 100 and beyond. What was your feeling about Wally Funk at age 82 doing what she did?
Well, I have to honestly tell you that as I was watching that in the morning, I was a little perplexed, and partly I was perplexed because I knew that it was going to be launched, but I didn't know any of the details. I didn't know who was going to be in the capsule. I didn't know how they had chosen the people that had been in the capsule, but it became pretty evident as I was watching that this was autonomously flown, right? In other words, there were largely no pilots on board. It was just going to do its thing and come back down. But what amazed me was Wally's endurance as she climbed the stairs right to the ready room, before they went off. And of course, a couple of the crackpot comments about, you can, put together $1 billion rocket, but you can't afford an elevator, to go to the go to the ready room. But she beat every single one of them on there. And then after during the news conference, I had an opportunity to listen to a little bit of that when I was in the car. And she talked about how not only was she first that day, yesterday, but she was first in many of the trainings that they did. And I think it's just a testament to the fact that longevity is a real thing. And it's not only a physical state of being, but it's a mental state of being as well.
So Phil, before you ask your question, a really quick follow up on that. What it goes to show, and I think it's all about mindset, Brad. 82 is still young. In our life where we live in the United States and the type of technology and everything that we have, 82 is still young, and it does not have to be decrepit and dying, right?
Yeah, and in fact, I know we'll talk about this during the webinar here or the podcast, but it's really the confluence of both finances as well as kind of the thought process along that. And I had the opportunity to tune into a webinar just very recently that was oriented towards individuals in the financial services community. And the question that was posed, and I think was validated in this presentation, the question is 100 the new 80? And I think that is absolutely the case. And I think people need to really get their heads wrapped around the fact that longevity is here. And it's your choice on how you're going to live those extended years in your life.
All right, so let's build on that, because what I see when business owners are working hard in their business, they're pouring their life savings literally back into the business for cash flow to get it growing and ideally launched and off the ground and into orbit where it can sustain some of its own. But for the smaller business owners that are in that high growth mode, what can they do, so really from a financial planning perspective, what can they do to securitize their financial future, especially if they're going to live well past 80?
Yeah, well, Phil, it's a great question, and it goes back to the license plate that I have on my car, and it says "Pay you first," and of course that stands for pay yourself first. It is incredibly tempting as a business owner to kind of default to that. I'm just going to pour everything back into the business, but and the business is important, but everybody, regardless of whether you're a business owner or you're employed by an employer, you need to be number one on your payroll, and your future needs to be the number one priority that takes place, even if it's just a small amount to get you into the habit of accumulating. Because the other part of this is the opportunity to work longer, right? And to have more productive and more high earning years. But don't wait and procrastinate and think that you're going to catch up on the backside, because that's where I see most of the mistakes being made.
Yeah, I think that window to catch up on the backside is really, really narrow. And I'm helping one client, and he had an unsolicited offer and a good offer for his business. But if he cashes out and interest rates are barely north of zero, there's not a lot of window or opportunity for him to invest. So how do you advise your clients that are healthy and still willing to be and able to be active in their business to maximize the value of their business for future investment?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I'm just a huge advocate of is having a comprehensive written financial plan, because what you really have to identify is, how much am I going to need in order to retire? We work with lots of business owners, and I can share with you that many of them, despite the fact that they've had very successful businesses that have produced phenomenal cash flow for them while they were there, and have sustained a very nice and comfortable lifestyle, the value that remains in the business, especially on a buyout, is not nearly enough to be able to sustain their lifestyle for much more than, say, a decade past their departure for the business. So I think it takes a lot of planning. I've written a number of articles on this particular subject, and the overlooked element I think that every business owner needs to know is that from day one, you need to know what your exit strategy is going to be. What is it going to look like? If I'm not successful, what's my exit strategy? If I'm marginally successful, moderately successful, or very successful, what is an exit strategy going to look like for me? And is that the sole source of my income, or am I going to be running kind of a parallel track where I, as in not only the business owner, but the chief employee of the firm, am I also contributing to my future, regardless of what happens to the business? And could I retire even if the business went to zero? I would prefer that business owners plan on the fact that their business that they built will have no value when they leave, so that they know that they can retire. And then all of that revenue that comes from a lifetime's worth of hard work is just pure icing on the cake.
Yeah, because one of Wally Funk's comments about her short flight yesterday was that the view wasn't as good as she thought it was going to be. And what you're saying is that the view of a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners' futures isn't really as good as what they want it to be. And so they need that comprehensive plan, that reality therapy. Really, it's a mathematical exercise with a whole bunch of psychology tied in. Awesome.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that's a great point, because you just talked, Brad, about the comprehensive financial planning, and I know something that's unique about you and your firm is that you take it even beyond the quantifiable financial numbers, because one of the things that you're driven by, and we touched on it at the very beginning, is longevity. And the reality is that if you've done a great job of doing all the financial part, but you haven't done a very good job of taking care of yourself physically, mentally, mostly all of that, you may not get to enjoy that all that hard work. Talk about the confluence that your firm works on and that you work with clients on not only the financial side of it, but also the lifestyle side of it.
Yeah, well, I think the first part of it is just a practical realization. And I don't have time to go into all the science here, but most individuals are going to live 10, 20, or even 30 years longer than they think. That's just a statement. And for the purposes of our time together today, I'm going to have everybody suspend reality, whether they realize that that's reality or not. Just suspend disbelief and go with me on that. And so then the next thing is, if you are going to be living 10, 20, even 30 years longer than you expect, how do you want those years to be? Do you want to be in a state of disengagement and decline, or do you want to be in a state of vitality, engagement, and really participating to life in its fullest? And I will share with you that there's this concept that's referred to the culturally conforming conveyor belt, which I think is slowly starting to see some fraying along the edges, but it's that which draws us back in to say, well, I don't want to live that long, or I don't expect to live that long. Or, if you ask somebody what the average age or how old they'll be when they die, it's very interesting to get people's answers and their perspective of why they came up with that, because it's largely misinformed. Of course, this is probably what we refer to as the blinding flash of the obvious. But the longer you live, the longer you're going to live. And that's because you have bypassed many of the hazards that would generally truncate one's life by living through childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, past your prime years, et cetera. And so that's important. So how does this kind of impact financial planning? Well, what we realized in the firm that we had created is that we were really about helping people live their ideal lives. And that is a definition that is theirs and theirs alone. They get to define what that looks like. But as we went through that process, we had a very distinct value proposition that started with the alignment of values and goals, getting their entire financial house in order, creating a place for them to have confidence that they were on track to achieve their goals, regardless of markets or economies or the world. And what that did was it started to create an environment where they could free up physical and mental space and time and really start to focus on things in their lives that was more important than money, which is kind of the pain point that initially brought them here. And that's when we discovered about 5-7 years ago that what people were really wanting is they were wanting life coaches who specialize in money. And so I sought my life coaching credentials and really started to embrace this concept of longevity and vital living, because that was a concern that clients had. Is I always talk to the people about the 6 big risks. And the first big risk is dying too soon. The second big risk is living too long. And what I tell people is most people aren't actually worried about living a long, impactful, productive life. What they're worried about is running out of money before they run out of life. And that can be an encumbrance to living a stress-free and vital, positive outlook type life if you're always constantly concerned about, well, will I have enough money to live?
We're not going to take any risks right now. We got to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's Spotlight sponsors. And when we come back with much more with our guest, Brad Berger, for our Hot or Not section of the show, I'm going to ask Brad if he thinks long-term care insurance is hot or not. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Would you like to grow your business, increase revenues, and raise profits? Would more financing from your banker help you grow? Who is guiding your succession plan? Would you like more control over your business so you can sleep better at night? SME Business Wealth Builder works with business leaders and owners like you to help them grow their business and build their business wealth. For more information and to check out free resources, go to SMEWealthBuilder.com.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Brad Berger. For our next segment, Hot or Not.
And Brad, we don't have to tell you what hot or not is. We're going to dive right into this because we probably have quite a few. Long-term care insurance has been big news in the state of Washington. You and I have had many personal conversations about it over the last few months as things have changed. So hot or not, long-term care insurance. And I guess what I'd like to add as a caveat on this is there's probably a couple different types of people. There are people who have a high amount of wealth and investments, and there's those who may not. So maybe talk about hot or not long-term care insurance for those folks.
Well, I think it's hot. And I've long been somebody who feels it's really important to walk their talk. I'm in my mid 50s. I've had long-term care for 20 years personally. So I think it's important. Now, I have it for a wide variety of reasons, and tongue in cheek, I have. I run a successful business. I've had the great blessings of being able to secure, my future retirement and my ability to live to, 113 and beyond. The thing that I joke about is I don't want anybody who would benefit from my demise financially to be responsible for taking care of me. And so I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I would have a little bit of choice in the matter. So I have a traditional long-term care policy that I'll say is no longer available because the industry has changed over a period of time, and clearly I have an unlimited benefit. I have a very robust daily benefits for a very long period of time. I mean, unlimited. So I'm going to be very well taken care of. And of course, what you and I are finding is that there are fewer and fewer companies, at least currently, in the state of Washington, who are even offering traditional long-term care. In fact, many carriers have suspended new applications until all the dust settles on this. But that does present, however, opportunities in the hybrid market, and I think that there are some good solutions. One of the things that I'm really prone to do is sit down with somebody and talk about what their goals are related to this and what they're looking for, as well as what their financial situation is. Here is kind of my quote with regard to long-term care, and that is for people who say, well, I simply can't afford the premium. My response to that is, if you can't afford the premium, then you certainly can't afford the event, because that is going to be far more expensive. The other thing, too, is I have another quote, which is, even if you could self-insure, why would you? And part of the reason is that I think that at least a portion of that risk should be transferred to a risk merchant, an insurance carrier, to be able to do that. Because if we, just from a planning concept, if we have to reserve for that event out of your current assets, what that means is that bucket of money, whatever that bucket of money is, that we're having to kind of cordon off, we have to invest at a much more conservative rate than if that money were freely available for investment. That differential in that interest rate that we might receive. So maybe it's in a bond portfolio yielding 3 or 4% versus, say, 8 or 9% in the open market. That 4 to 5% differential in interest, that's your premium. So don't think that you're not actually paying a premium by self-insuring. So those are just some quick, very high-level views on long-term care.
So, Brad, I've learned that you're a pilot and a skydiver. So both of those some might perceive as risky, but I would see you as an expert in risk management and avoiding the risk, because you clearly know what can go wrong due to gravity. What do you think, hot or not, people getting their adrenaline rush from their investments?
So I get asked this question a lot, because it particularly comes up when people ask me questions like, what do I think of cryptocurrency, right? or what I'll call highly speculative investments. I'm pretty conservative. Dan will probably appreciate this. We're all about hitting singles and doubles and just getting on base time after time after time after time. We aren't swinging for the fences, not trying to hit home runs and grand slams. It's really about consistency. And I think one of the things that most people don't realize is that if you actually were to dissect some of the best performing mutual funds, or even the best performing money managers, one of the things that you'll find is that what places them in the top quartile, or even the top quintile, top 20, 25%, is their consistency. They could have a really good year, But what you'll find is they just keep hitting singles and doubles. And I tell people that if you want to do that, I'm not going to be responsible for that money, because you shouldn't put any money at risk in those sorts of things that you are not willing to lose.
So, Brad, I can't tell you how it does my heart good to hear you using sports metaphors. I don't even know if I can ask my next question. I'm choked up right now. I have to very, very well played. And it was a money ball thing. So it was all about money. It was all about getting on base. So a little money ball there. I'm gonna do another DIY on Hot or Not. And you and I share the same fitness coach. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this. DIY fitness, like Peloton or going to YouTube and all of that. Talk about, is it hot or not? DIY fitness.
You know, I'm going to actually say it's hot for individuals that feel like they have the self-discipline to hold themselves accountable. And I'll just say that, you know, I know individuals personally in my family, et cetera, that are huge supporters of Peloton, and have done incredibly well with that. And I think that I personally, you know, I have a piece of equipment that I use with our personal trainer that has an entire program. Somebody says, you know, well, you know, why are you working with a personal trainer? And I said, well, for two reasons. Number one, I know something about myself, and that is that I need to be held accountable to a real human being. That's number one. I can't be held accountable to some virtual, you know, program, you know, that's sending me text messages or attaboys on my phone. I need somebody that's going to, you know, be there when I'm there. The other thing that I have found for me, I have very, very specific goals. So those goals are best realized, right, by an individual tailored program of both fitness and nutrition for me. But I'm a big believer in using whatever tools are necessary to get your butt off the couch and get you engaged.
I have a quick follow-up, Phil, if you don't mind, a quick follow-up to that. And you know, one of the reasons that I hired Brett, who is one of our podcast guests, one of Brad's last ones, one of the reasons I hired him was I also didn't want to get hurt. And I had injured my shoulder, and I kind of knew what I was doing, but I still hurt myself. And I think there's a correlation with the question that Phil asked about kind of the DIY on your own investments. Yeah. There's a chance to get hurt physically if you don't have somebody who's showing you the right way, and financially as well. Would you agree?
I would, and I want to go back now that you've done that to just talk a little bit about risk, because that was Phil's question to me, has to do with that. And here's an observation that I've had in over 30 years of working with individuals and businesses and creative financial plans, and that is that most people without a financial plan are taking more risk than they need to take in order to make their plan come to fruition. And the problem is, because they're taking that additional risk, they're more susceptible to getting burned, getting out of the market and not staying fully invested. And then, of course, the problem is, and then when do you get back in?
So there's a risk of living too short. There's a risk of living too long, but everybody is making the risk much higher than necessary because they have no plan.
I agree. I think what ends up happening when they don't have a plan. So one of my favorite Zig Ziglar quotes, and it applies to so many things in life, and it certainly applies to financial planning. And his quote is, you know, it's your choice. This is a modification of it. It's your choice. You can be a wandering generality, or you can be a meaningful specific. And I think that when you have a comprehensive written financial plan that you understand, what ends up happening is you shift from that wandering generality and you start to become a meaningful specific.
Well, I'm going to become meaningfully specific right now to tell everybody we're going to take our last break. We're going to take that short break to hear from our sponsors, of one of which you'll hear Brad is. When we come back with our guest, Brad Berger, for our Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to find out about maybe something that Brad failed at. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, and Kitsap Sun newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and today our guest is Brad Berger. And for our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
Oh, Brad, I've been waiting for this moment for Plead the Fifth.
Yeah. I was thinking this is your Cobra Kai moment.
So this one is a little bit of a play on one that you've asked people in the past, but here's the Plead the Fifth. What was the failure? What was the mistake that you most learned from, whether it was professional or personal? What was that misstep that you look back and say, that really was the most helpful mistake I ever made?
Well, there are probably one in particular, although I could probably point to other elements to it, but I was an infantry officer, airborne ranger, and in order to do that, you have to go to a very rigorous course, the U.S. Army Ranger course, and I was a recycle in the mountains, and although the incidence of recycle is relatively high, which basically means that in my particular class, the way that they ran it is it was essentially 8 weeks long, a little longer than 8 weeks. And every 2 weeks you rotated out of a phase, from one phase to the next phase of the next phase. So we were at Fort Benning, Georgia, Dahlonega, Georgia. Then we went to the Florida phase at Fort Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And then finally to Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. I did not successfully complete the mountain phase, one of the toughest phases, because I was a winter ranger. And so I was in the mountains of Dahlonega, Georgia, and the Tennessee Valley Divide during the middle of the winter. And I had the opportunity to repeat the mountain phase a second time. Devastating because your peers are getting on the bus to go to Florida. You're getting on the bus to go back what they affectionately referred to as the gulag, and where you get to wait until the next class comes through that you'll get to join. And that was pretty devastating. But after a day or so of licking my wounds and feeling sorry for myself, I took that opportunity to really capitalize on the ability to get some food, to get some rest, and really to reflect upon what it was that I had executed to the standard that I needed to execute, and really start to rehone some of the notes and experiences that I had to make sure that as I went through the next time, I'd be successful.
So first of all, thank you for your military service. Both Dan and my dads were World War II veterans.
Yeah, I'm a little more current than that.
Yes, we appreciate that.
And as Brad knows, my dad was Navy. Just bringing that up.
Oh,
so.
Okay. Yeah.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah. My dad was Army. I think he got promoted up to a corporal and went out to party and came back too late and got busted for being AWOL and back down a private. So started and finished a private. Finished with a lot more machine gun scars than what he started with. So what makes you uncomfortable today now?
Wow. Uh, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot, given what I have dealt with, that necessarily makes me uncomfortable, other than maybe being a guest on the Shrimp Tank, and being in the plead the fifth section. But from being uncomfortable, I think the thing that makes me uncomfortable is when I sense, and I think we all have these moments, what I call overwhelm. Right. I tend to commit to a lot of things. And sometimes the convergence of all of the due dates all at once or in the same week, that sense of overwhelm, that makes me really uncomfortable. But I have a few coping mechanisms to deal with that. But as we say, I'm a work in progress. I'm not perfect.
Most entrepreneurs use overwhelm as one of their default operating systems. And just so you know, from your co-hosting days, it's taken 8 feet to fill your shoes as co-host on this Shrimp Tank.
No problem.
That's exactly right. I never thought of it that way. Brad's worth 8 feet. So listen, Brad, actually, since your co-hosting days, we've got a new thing. We're going to ask, we're asking the same question every week for the first year. Then we're going to rechange it. So I'm going to make sure I get this in. I know you're an entrepreneur. I know you're a business guy. And you can't be I'm going to take you away. You can't be a financial planner. You can't be a life coach. I want you to tell me, based on a hobby, you're starting a new business. What would that new business, based on a hobby that you have, what would it be and why?
Well, it would definitely have to be something, I think, in the aviation community. And while I know that the world is full of what I'll call flight instructors or flight training or whatnot, something I'm passionate about, would love to be more and more involved in. But I think what I would really be interested in is getting into the autonomous flight, the UAS or drone type technology, because I think that there's plenty of market. I'd have to figure out exactly what the niche that I would want to be in that space, but it would likely be something in that realm.
So building on that, what hobby, sport, or activity would you like to be doing in 10 years that you're not doing today?
Well, I think I just touched on that. So one of the things that I'm working on, because it's just an important part of what I'll call proficiency and currency, is that I have some initial instructor ratings for aviation. That's to expand that to a full-fledged certified flight instructor for both basic aircraft as well as instrument flight. And I would like to be instructing my most passionate part of flying, which is float flying, flying on floats.
So I want to build on the flight path, and really,
Sure.
as a financial planner, you're creating that flight plan for your clients. So this is less about you and more about them. But what's the most common obstacle that you're seeing in prospects or business owners that they just need to get past so they can get their financial flight plan for life?
I think that we touched on it at the very beginning, Phil, and that is the fact that they have over focused on the business and not enough focus on themselves as individuals, because it leads to another problem, and that problem has to do with the exit strategy and this concept of, well, there's such a self-identification of themselves inside the business, they can't imagine what life would be like, right, not being in the business. And there's a lot of strategies around that, which we're talking about one, which is developing healthy hobbies and interests outside of your work life.
So Brad, because I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to take the risk of running out of time.
Okay.
You have an event coming up that is really
I do.
exciting in October. Before we end the podcast, let's take a couple minutes right now and please share with everybody what that is.
Well, it's called Transformation on the Water. It's going to be held at the Port Ludlow Resort in Port Ludlow, Washington. It's a boutique inn, as well as recreation area. Lots of things to participate in. It's 3 days. It's an immersive type event. We have 12 individual workshops for each day, and plenty of time for reflection, for exercise, meditation, yoga, massage, farm to table meals, as well as activities such as golf and kayaking and hiking and waterfall viewing, etc. And that's going to be in October 9 through 11. I am the individual that's bringing most of the workshop and coursework. And then I've got I've got a guest speaker to talk about nutrition, as well as the Port Ludlow Inn, world-class farm to table meals, as well as all the activities that they have there. And if they want more information, it's really easy. It's being sponsored by the Port Ludlow Resort. So it's portludlowresort.com/retreat for all the information, and people can sign up.
Brad, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank podcast. Hope that side of the desk was as much fun, if not more, than the side you're used to. For our listeners,
You guys were gentle. I was bracing for something way worse.
Well, then our plan worked. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you and learn more about you and your company and financial planning and getting that comprehensive financial planning and paying themselves first, like your license plate says, how can they get more information? How do they reach you?
I think the best way to reach me is simply at the website, ideallife360.com. And as well as they could email me directly, Brad at ideallife360.com.
Everyone, make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, such as iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify. Some of those might be good investments. Ask Brad. Please follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Phil, thanks for being the co-host today. I've got big news. He's filling in next week again, so you're going to get back-to-back weeks of Phil. In fact, I got a little pop-up notification while we were here, something about the U.S.-Canadian border. So who knows? Maybe it'll be open by the time we speak again. You never know. Brad, it's been a pleasure. The next time we have you on, I'll make sure and bring up the time that you took me on your float plane for a ride, and I had a great time. We had some fun stories on that, but thanks for being on. Everyone, our next show will be Wednesday, July the 21st, a week from today. It will be live streamed on our Facebook page at noon. Caroline Smith, the CEO of DataWorks. DataWorks is a managed service provider in the tech business. So we're going to be talking a lot of technology, cybersecurity, the whole thing. Again, my co-host will be Phil Simchich, the guy you see right here with me. We're looking forward to that. But in the meantime, and Brad, I got a new ending here. I got a new ending, so you have to get used to it. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and be prosperous. Because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.